Good afternoon. My name is Amy Giorgiani, and as the Vice Chair of the Board of Historic Resources, I hereby call this meeting to order. Okay. To take action to discuss or transact the business statutorily required or necessary to continue the operation of the Board of Historic Resources. The board is assembled in person at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture in Richmond. DHR is also presenting today's meeting virtually to facilitate attendance by individuals unable to physically attend, and the meeting is being recorded. Deputy Director Williams, will you please proceed with the roll call?
Yes, Dr. Spivey.
Here.
Mr. Towns.
Here.
Mr. Bostic.
Here.
Ms. Hudson.
Here.
Hartley.
Here.
And Dr. Rutherford. And Chair Giorgiani.
Here. The Department of Historic Resources, I will now read the land acknowledgement statement. The Department of Historic Resources, the Board of Historic Resources, and the State Review Board acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of Virginia and express its gratitude for their continued stewardship of her lands and waterways over many generations. We also acknowledge the free and enslaved Africans and their descendants whose labors and contributions on behalf of the Commonwealth have long been overlooked. We commit ourselves to meaningful engagement with all Virginians, past and present, as we strive to fulfill our charge as stewards of Virginia's long and rich history. So the purpose of the Board of Historic Resources is an official policy-making board of the Commonwealth of Virginia created by the Code of Virginia. Its policies are implemented by the Department of Historic Resources, which day in and day out labors on behalf of our irreplaceable resources in the interest of the citizens of the Commonwealth. The board is charged primarily with the responsibility for designating historic landmarks of local, state, or national significance, establishing historic preservation practices for the care and management of our Virginia historic landmarks, designating state-recognized historic districts and archaeological sites and zones, approving historical highway markers, reviewing programs and services of the agency, and making recommendations to the Director of DHR and the Governor regarding programs and services, and in order to preserve important sites and buildings in perpetuity, and accepting voluntarily granted gifts of preservation easement over historic properties to the Commonwealth. The Governor of Virginia selects members of the board from volunteer and professional leaders of Virginia's history, preservation, and museum communities. Votes taken during this meeting are official actions of the Commonwealth of Virginia Board of Historic Resources. We are joined today by Andrew Tarn and Wes Morgan of the Office of the Attorney General, DHR staff, and agency director, Roger Kirchen. I now invite my fellow board members to introduce themselves.
David Hartley, live in the Plains, Virginia, and work for Atlantic Union Bank.
I'm Ashley Spivey. I am an historical anthropologist working full-time as a consultant in tribal historic preservation management, and I live in King William County.
Right.
Jamie Bosket, president of the Virginia Museum of History and Culture of Richmond, Virginia.
Martin Towns, deputy butler at the Governor's Mansion, the mansion historian, and I'm from King William County.
And Amy Giorgiani, Falls Church, Virginia. So we are now on the public comment portion of our meeting. The Virginia Board of Historic Resources desires to hear the viewpoints of the interested citizens, but also needs to conduct its business in an orderly and efficient manner. Therefore, the next portion of this meeting provides an opportunity for general public comments on items not formally part of the promulgated or adopted agenda. This portion of the board meeting is intended as an opportunity to identify matters of interest and concern, and the role of Virginia Board of Historic Resources is to listen and potentially provide direction to staff for follow-up, and not to formally respond to speakers or take official action on matters presented. If matters broached during the public comment portion of the agenda seem to warrant board attention and discussion and are within the board's authority, then those matters may be styled as a formal agenda item for subsequent board meetings. In consideration of the time constraints associated with regular board agenda items, speakers during this public comment period are requested to limit their presentation to a maximum of 3 minutes. Upon recognition by the chair, we ask that speakers clearly state their name and then directly address their comments to the board. The board also asks the speakers to refrain from making any references to specific individuals. As a reminder, board members will not officially respond to speakers or take action on matters presented. And we will time it for 3 minutes. At this time, we will invite those in the public who signed in. And I believe today we just have the one person for this afternoon who has signed up, and I believe it's Casey Stallworth. If Casey could come up and join us.
Doing once again. I spoke earlier today. I'm just glad to be here to be able to present this for Clarence Smith. Clarence Smith is lost in history. And I say that because a lot of African Americans have been, raised to a level like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and more. I mean, I can name more, but Clarence Smith has had a real effect on my life when I didn't have a father. They used to call Clarence Smith the Father, Father Allah. And he taught us that we are made in the image of God. So a lot of people, if they didn't understand the teachings of the Father, I can explain. He taught, as gods, like they said in Psalms. He would point out certain scriptures to really enlighten the people who was, in the dark, people who was lost, like me. Just like I said before, I grew up in a family with 2 drug addicts, my mom and my dad. So I didn't really have a father that taught me the right things to do in life. So when I learned from Clarence was to take care of your family, take care of your health, take care of your mind, because that's going to lead you into the future. Clarence has been edified and glorified in New York, Harlem, Brooklyn. They look at him as a big leader in the hip hop community and the naturopathic community. And I just feel that, Clarence should have his stamp in the state that he was born in. Just like when you go to a pilgrimage with Jesus, or you go to a pilgrimage with Muhammad, you go to the land he was born, because that's that's where he got his roots. That's where he got his upbringing, his knowledge of what he was going to teach from a young age. So I really think that this right here can change communities. It can change lives. It will give me an anchor so I can go ahead and save the streets of these kids that's throwing their life away in prison. I have been in prison before, and I could tell you that prison ain't a good thing, to be in. And sometimes it stands in rehabilitation, but you have to rehabilitate yourself. And that's what the father, Clarence Smith, had taught me. Go into your zone, rehabilitate yourself, study, learn mathematics, learn history, learn things that you can be able to teach the kids, to be able to, for them to not go down the same path you have been going down, and I was raised, just like I told you guys, I was raised in this household where, I felt like my back was against the wall. And when I would go to my lessons and learn, I would learn to be able to lift up my brother, lift up the people that's around. That's why it's a universal thing. My nonprofit is Universal Kings and Queens. We did a partnership with Dominant Village because we seen the vision. I think that getting this marker for Clarence Smith will be the beginning of something great in the state of Virginia. I want to make the state of Virginia something on the level of New York or California, because they're main states where people can go to and their history is brought out to the public. Certain things we need to bring out to the light to the people to let them understand that we're not hiding no truths about us. Because we're not in the same state we was in the 60s. Or we're not in the same state no more. We're in 2026 where we're united together now. We're not separated. We don't have to go to different bathrooms and things of that nature. And I want to be one that stands up for that we're all one nation. And that's what I learned from Clarence, And I thank y'all for just listening to me again. And that's all I have to say about that. You know what I mean?
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that concludes our public comment portion today.
We have Well, we had a few that had signed up, but I do not, can I get? No, maybe you just called the name. Before, when you couldn't hear from me over there. Marvin Jones, is the only one that I see of the three people that signed up.
If we didn't order, Stephanie?
Just tell Marvin that he is unmuted.
Okay.
Let me begin.
Mr. Jones, you're unmuted if you want to talk.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on this endeavor. I grew up in Newsom Park and attended Newsom Park Elementary School, and my family's roots are in Newport News, and they trace back to this historic neighborhood, which will be presented to you today. As a youth, I was always curious about math, science, and history, so much so that I went on to North Carolina A&T State University to study mathematics and to Indiana University, where I studied astrophysics. In 2015, after reading the book Hidden Figures, I came to learn that both Dorothy Vaughan and Katherine Johnson once lived in my neighborhood. And we know the impact of these two women, along with Mary Jackson, Barbara Canwright, Macy Roberts, and so many more women computers, and their impact, what they had on advancing our nation's space program. And just growing up and knowing that much later in life, I often think to myself and imagine how many others would have aspired to pursue endeavors in the sciences if they had known about the rich history of our neighborhood and of these individuals much earlier. Furthermore, I want to just share that I learned of the value of this space that was both to the community and to Newport News economically. Historic spaces matter in our progress forward. Continuing to support and acknowledge complex histories and learning from this history is how we make our society grow to its greatest potential. The historic marker for me and for many others is more than an acknowledgement of the importance of Newsom Park. It is also cultivating curiosity and hope in communities throughout Newport News. It is a reminder of how remarkable Newport News is as a city in producing excellence. And this historical marker for me and for others shows us who we can be if we choose the best parts of ourselves. I want to again just thank you all for your time and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share a few remarks on this historical marker that you'll see later on today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
I still do not see the other two
Awful.
online, so
Okay.
that concludes.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for those public comments today. We appreciate learning from them. So I'd like to now introduce Dr. Jennifer Lux, who will present the historical highway marker portion of today's business.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jennifer Lukes. I'm the Highway Marker Program Manager. I'll be presenting the marker agenda, which consists of 7 new markers, 7 replacements, and then our new set of applications that are under consideration. The marker editorial committee at DHR approved all of the texts of these markers that I'll be presenting at their meeting on March 3rd. So starting off with our set of new markers. We first have Thomas Carter in Scott County. Thomas Carter, planter and patriot, was an early settler of Rye Cove, arriving about 1773. Governor Patrick Henry appointed him a justice of the first Russell County Court in 1786. This area was Russell County at the time. It became Scott County in 1814, I believe, well after Carter had died. Carter also became a lieutenant in the county militia that year, and his farm functioned as a garrison known as Carter's Fort. Alongside Daniel Boone and others, he corresponded with the governor about frontier defense during a period of extended conflict with Native Americans after the Revolutionary War. He represented Russell in the House of Delegates and in the 1788 Virginia Convention to ratify the U.S. Constitution. Next, we have Thomas Day in Dinwiddie County. Thomas Day, a prominent furniture maker and businessman, was born to free Black parents in Dinwiddie. His brother, John Day, was a founder of Liberia, and his grandfather, Dr. Thomas Stewart, was a free Black physician and entrepreneur. In the 1820s, Day opened a furniture shop in Milton, North Carolina, that became the largest in the state, producing furnishings and interior woodwork of high artistic quality. Free Black, enslaved, and white artisans worked in the shop, where Day had adopted steam-powered tools by the 1850s. Day's work has been exhibited widely, and he's won national recognition as an innovator in the furniture industry. The lynching of William Shorter in Frederick County. On the morning of June 13th, 1893, African-American teenager William Shorter was being transported under guard by train from Stanton to Winchester to stand trial for the alleged attempted rape of a white woman. At the Kernstown Depot, 15 to 30 armed white men detained and boarded the train. They broke the chains that held Shorter to his seat, dragged him from the car, suspended him from a tree branch, and shot him to death. More than 4,000 lynchings took place in the U.S. between 1877 and 1950. More than 100 people, primarily African-American men, were lynched in Virginia. As in most other racially motivated lynchings, no one was ever brought to justice for Shorter's murder. The Robert R. Moton Rosenwald School in Cumberland County, and you heard a bit about this project this morning from the students from Cumberland Middle School who were with us to talk about their project. They did all the research for this. Robert R. Moton, a nationally significant Black educator, began his teaching career in 1888 at Cottontown School, which had close ties to nearby Cornerstone and Midway Baptist churches. The school was replaced a little before 1920 after Matilda M. Booker, who was the county's Jeans Fund Supervisor of Education for African Americans, campaigned for better facilities. Financial support came from the Black community, the county, and the Rosenwald Fund. The school, renamed for Moton, closed in 1964 and was later demolished. So what you're seeing here is the first building, that old Cottontown School from the 1880s. Community life in Newsom Park. This is in Newport News. The federal government built Newsom Park during World War II to provide housing for newly arrived African-American defense employees and their families. Continuing to thrive after the war, the close-knit neighborhood attracted residents from a wide range of occupations and income levels. It featured an elementary school, community center, semi-pro baseball team, and Black-owned businesses that generated economic growth. Notable residents included NASA mathematicians Katherine Johnson and Dorothy Vaughan, first Black and first female mayor of Newport News, Jessie Ratley, and renowned guitarist David Williams. The original houses, designed to be temporary, were demolished in the 1960s. Clarence Smith, Allah, City of Danville. Clarence Edward Smith was born and raised in Danville. After serving as an infantryman in the U.S. Army during the Korean War, he settled in New York and joined the Nation of Islam, adopting the name Clarence 13X. In the mid-1960s, he founded the 5% Nation and became known as Allah. He taught that each Black man is divine and that a select 5% of people understand the truth of existence and must enlighten others. In Harlem, New York, in 1967, he established the Allah School in Mecca. This movement spread to cities across the United States, and his teachings had a significant influence on hip-hop culture and music across generations. Henry Reed and Old Time Music in Giles County. The tunes played for generations in the mountains of Giles and nearby counties were foundational to the old-time music revival of the 1960s and 1970s. Glen Lynn resident James Henry Neal Reed, known primarily as a longbow-style fiddler, had learned hundreds of tunes beginning in his childhood and was part of a community of musicians who played locally and with family. Alan Jabor, later the founding director of the American Folklife Center, learned tunes from Reed in the 1960s, played them widely with his own string band, and deposited recordings of Reed in the Library of Congress, disseminating this traditional Appalachian music and extending Reed's influence to new generations. Okay, so those are our 7 new markers up for approval today. So for the board's consideration of those.
May I have a motion to approve new highway markers 1 through 7?
So move.
So moved. Thank you, Dr. Basket. Is there a second?
Second.
A second, Dr. Spivey. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, the new highway markers 1 through 7 are approved.
Thank you. Next up is our replacement marker agenda for today. We have 7, a little more than usual. Typically we have 3 or 4, but we were able to do first this quarter. As usual, we don't go over those individually, but the text appeared in the packets that board members received prior to the meeting. So we have Williamsburg's Camp, Wilton, the White House, Chickahominy Church, Cross Mountain Mercer, and 7 Days Battles, Jackson's March to the Battlefield, as well as 7 Days Battles, White Oak Swamp.
Are there any questions on replacement markers 1 through 7? Any discussion? Okay, do I have a motion to approve replacement markers 1 through 7?
So moved.
So moved. Thank you, Ms. Pope. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, thank you, Martin. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
In favor or opposed? Nope. That motion is approved for replacement markers 1 through 7.
Thank you. And then finally, we have the applications under consideration. So these are the 15 marker applications we received by the February 1st deadline. And committee at DHR scored all of the applications in accordance with the criteria that is found in the application form. So today we'll be asking the board for the approval of a certain number of these. And then the final text will be presented to the board at the next meeting in June. So we would like to ask for the approval of the top scorers in this round, which are the markers you see listed numbered 1 through 9. And also like to request to have numbers 10 and 11 designated the alternates, meaning they would be eligible to move forward if any of the first 9 drop out of the process for any reason.
Is there any discussion? All right, may I have a motion to approve the applications for consideration at the June board meeting as presented?
So moved.
So moved. All right, thank you, Dr. Spivey. Second, Mary Pote Hudson. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. The motion for the applications for consideration at the June board meeting is approved.
Thank you.
That's it.
That concludes our marker business.
Oh, yes, Martin?
Is number 1 a reference to the Oxycontin mission?
Yeah, that, right. It
Okay.
was located most likely along the York River.
Cool.
Jennifer, the students that put forward one of the markers that was approved today, I'm sure there's a process to notify them, but I'm hoping that we can get to them soon. I wish they could have seen the result of
Yeah,
their,
they had to leave because their
work.
bus was due back in Cumberland County earlier.
can we do something special to get the word to them quickly that they were
Yeah, I'll
successful?
be communicating with their teacher this
Great.
afternoon, so maybe they'll even find out before they leave.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Excellent. Thank you. Great, great points. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Lukes. Now we will get an update from Joanna Wilson Green regarding state bureau permits.
Good afternoon.
I'm Joanna Wilson Green, and I'm here to give you your quarterly update on the burial permitting program. This is for your information only, and there's no action required from the board. As we've spoken about in the past, the permit was created by the Code of Virginia at Section 10.1-2305, which was enacted in 1989 and revised in 2024 to incorporate language specific to consultation with federally recognized Virginia tribes. It's guided by the administrative code that was promulgated by the VHR in 1991, and every action that we take pursuant to this program is on the board's behalf. And I'm happy to say that after a very busy 2025, 2026 has settled down a little bit. We've only issued 4 burial permits since the last board meeting. All were anticipatory, meaning there was no purposeful disturbance of buried human remains proposed. We've had 7 permits closed following completion of permit terms. 12 have been extended to accommodate delays and complications, and 1 was terminated when the project it was associated with was abandoned. So we're off to a relatively slow start, and I'll take it. I did want to give you an update on one of our bigger projects. This is a project at the Gala Compressor Station in Botetourt County, pursuant to demolition and rebuild of the Roanoke regulator buildings. The permit was issued in September 2024 and just closed earlier this week. As you can see by the map, the compressor station is in the middle of a floodplain on the James River, and it is also in the middle of an extensive late pre-contact settlement that is already known to contain burials, many of which have already been disturbed by construction activities. So we knew going into the project that we were likely to find human remains, and the permit would be necessary. It was requested in order to accommodate archaeological excavations prior to replacement of the grass regulators, and the work would not have been possible at any extent without guidance provided to us by Chief Diane Shields and the Cultural Resources staff of the Monacan Indian Nation. As we previously said, the law has been revised to require consultation with federally recognized Virginia tribes. This is something that we would have done anyway, whether the law required it or not. But Chief Shields and her staff responded immediately when we reached out to them, and they've remained an integral part of this process throughout. And with their guidance, we were able to navigate the identification of displaced ancestral remains during the archaeological work and to come up with a plan when the archaeologists in charge of the project found additional remains in a review of assemblages that had been previously recovered from the site. And that unfortunately happens more often than anyone would like. All told, the permit required 4 extensions and revisions, which were all coordinated directly with the nation in order to accommodate these discoveries and various changes in the project scope. It's one of the reasons that it took us about 1.5 years to complete. But in December 2025, we were able to facilitate the transfer of custody of all ancestral remains directly into the nation's hands, followed by transfer of all indigenous cultural material recovered by these archaeologists from the Gala site. And in closing, I just want to reiterate how grateful we are to Chief Shields and to the nation for their guidance throughout this project, in large part because they were willing to place their trust in all of us. And I hope that we've met that trust and developed a relationship that will benefit all of us moving forward. And that's what I have for you this time. Does anyone have questions? None. All right, well, thank you very much, and I will look forward to seeing you in June.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On behalf of the board, thank you for the work you do. Great. So thank you, Ms. Green. So our last course of business today focuses on the easement program. We'll begin with new easement offers for consideration.
Good afternoon. I'm Wendy Musumeci. I'm going to be presenting the first new easement offer for consideration today. And then my colleague Kyle will follow up with the 2 other new easement offers, and we'll ask for your vote as a block on them at one time. Today, I'm going to be presenting an easement offer for Oak Hill in Loudoun County. And because of the more public-facing nature of this property and the complexity of the overall project, I'm going to give you a little bit more detail than we normally do for our new easement offers. To begin with, on the screen is an aerial image of the Oak Hill property, which together with nearly 2,000 acres adjoining and nearby comprised the Loudoun County holdings of President James Monroe from 1794 until his death in 1831. Located along James Monroe Highway, also known as US Route 15 in Aldie, Oak Hill includes an 88.426 acre parcel containing the historic core of the larger 1,200 acre Oak Hill Farm property. It's located on a prominent knoll that slopes gently toward the south and west, and the Little River, which lies just outside the western boundary of the easement area. In November of 2025, the Conservation Fund acquired the 1,200 acre property, which was divided into two separate parcels, one containing the roughly 88 acre historic core, and the remaining parcel, which incorporated approximately 1,100 acres of open space land. At this time, the board will only be considering an historic preservation and open space easement on the 88 acres and not the remaining 1,100 acres of open space land. However, depending on associated grant requirements and ultimate disposition of the property, there may still be an opportunity for the board to hold an easement in the future on those 1,100 acres. We have expressed the agency's interest in holding an easement on the 1,100 acres that would minimally focus on protection for archaeological resources, and we will continue to discuss this option with the Conservation Fund as they move forward with their plans for the property. Regardless, the Conservation Fund is committed to conserving the entire property, and to support this, the deed by which they acquired the property requires them to convey a perpetual conservation or open space easement on all of the property, or to convey it to the Commonwealth of Virginia or Loudoun County prior to transferring it to any other party. There are several reasons why, and I'm trying to anticipate some questions you may ask here, but there are several reasons why the Conservation Fund decided to separate out this 88 acre parcel, which is shown on the map there on the left. The primary one relates to grant funding. Different streams of funding are being used to target different sections of the property. And when the Conservation Fund began raising funds and planning to acquire the property in 2024, they wanted to ensure that they could immediately transfer the house and the historic core, which is this 88 acre area, to the state or to another entity right after they took title. To meet this goal, they applied for and they were awarded a $2 million Virginia Land Conservation Fund grant in the historic area preservation category. And the VLCF grant requires that the Board of Historic Resources hold an easement over the property, and that's because it was funded in the historic area category. This grant does have an end of calendar year 2026 deadline, which is one reason why we're presenting the easement offer over this portion now to try to meet that end of calendar year deadline. Additionally, the Conservation Fund originally intended to close on those remaining 1,100 acres as funding came in from various grant sources, some of which include a stateside land and water conservation fund grant for recreational development and a large contribution from Loudoun County. All of these funding sources have different deadlines, different requirements and restrictions, and it sometimes can be difficult to overlay them or use them all at one time on one property. So given the complexity of this project, the Conservation Fund has also had to adapt their original plans. And in November of 25, they acquired all of the property, the entire 1,200 acres in one transaction rather than sort of breaking it up as they had originally thought they might. The Conservation Fund now plans to retain ownership for the next few years while they work with state and local partners to conserve the land and provide for future public access to the site. Now that I've kind of gone through some of the details of the transaction, I want to focus on a description of the property itself. There are numerous conservation values associated with Oak Hill, from historic and open space values to water quality, forest, soil, and agricultural values. Our focus obviously is primarily on the historic significance of the property And Oak Hill Farm was designated a National Historic Landmark in 1960 in the areas of politics and government for its association with U.S. President James Monroe. It was also individually listed on the National Register in 1966 and the Virginia Landmarks Register in 1969. And the nominated area does encompass approximately those 1,200 acres. We know that there was indigenous occupation of the larger property pre-European contact. We also know from census records and other documentation that there were a number of enslaved individuals living and working on the property throughout its history. Within the 88-acre easement area, there are 7 extant historic buildings dating from 1794 to 1831. This area also includes over 40 late 19th to early 20th century buildings and structures relating to the property's later development as an agricultural complex. I put this image up for you to just get a sense of the number of buildings and structures that are on the property. This is a map taken from a study that was completed by Stack Preservation Landscape Architects and Planners in early 2025. But I think it provides a good visual representation of the domestic and agricultural landscapes at Oak Hill and the existing buildings and structures that are going to be within the area we are proposing to accept the easement on. A little bit about Oak Hill, the building itself and the farm. It was purchased by James Monroe and his uncle, Judge Joseph Jones, in 1794. The property functioned as a home for Monroe in various capacities from 1811 to 1830. The main house was constructed between 1822 and 1823 during Monroe's second term as president. As originally built, the 2-story main house was a brick dwelling that contained a central block with a tetra-style 2-story rear portico flanked by single 1-story bay wings. And the photograph on the top left, the black and white photograph, shows one end of the building before modifications were made in the 1920s. The Oak Hill house is still distinguished by its recessed arched entrance with fanlight and the detailing of the Tuscan portico on the south side. Notable interior features include 2 marble mantelpieces sent to Monroe by the Marquis de Lafayette, as well as panel doors, crown molding, chair rails, wood flooring, and other architectural features throughout the house. Oak Hill served as Monroe's primary residence following his retirement in 1825. He and his wife Elizabeth lived on the property until her death in 1830 and his subsequent move to New York City and death in 1831. A gentleman named Frank Littleton acquired Oak Hill Farm in 1920 and employed architect Henry David Whitfield to expand the main house. And those wings that you see in the black and white photo were enlarged to be 2 stories in height and 2 bays in length. And then they added 2-story porches on each end. Littleton also developed the large terraced gardens that are located south of the main house and a little bit in front as well. So there are some Monroe era buildings, as I mentioned, still on the property. These include the Judge Jones Cottage, which is the top right photo, the yellow house. That is thought to have been built circa 1800, so before the main house. There's also a blacksmith shop, smokehouse, spring house, and portions of a large barn. There are ruins of a stone stallion barn traditionally associated with the Monroe occupancy, and that photo is the middle one on the right side. However, there's some thought that this date of construction may not be accurate, and this building may post-date Monroe's occupancy. During the late 19th through the early 20th centuries, agricultural operations expanded at Oak Hill, and that started under the Littleton ownership. And then from that point forward, there were various types of agricultural activities that happened, including dairy farming, a cattle operation, horse breeding, sheep farming. And the resulting agricultural building complex that today is located west of the main house is an important example of late 19th and early 20th century architecture and agricultural practices in Northern Virginia. And it involved both crop production and animal husbandry. And as I've mentioned, there are over 40 buildings and structures on the property associated with this period of its history. Some noteworthy examples include the main barn, which is circa 1875, the dairy barn, which is circa 1890, and a machine shop, which includes a windmill, also circa 1890, and the farm manager's house. There are also a number of tenant houses, and smaller agricultural buildings such as a scale shed, pump house, smaller barns, and numerous frame sheds. So I've gone through sort of a really brief overview of the historic significance and the buildings and structures that are present at Oak Hill. As I mentioned, there are also other resources associated with the property, including potential archaeological sites, lowlands and riparian buffers along the Little River, areas of wooded cover, prime agricultural lands, and that frontage along Route 15, which is a national byway and is within the Journey Through Hollow Ground corridor. We have been working with the Conservation Fund to finalize a comprehensive easement boundary survey that thankfully shows all the existing buildings and structures on the property with footprint measurements, which is like gold because we don't have to measure everything and it's all on the survey. So that was really exciting for us. Three easement program staff members, myself included, we made another site visit to the property back in February. We spent 2 days there documenting the exterior and interiors of all the buildings to understand the resources, sort of the current conditions on the property, and then potential uses that are anticipated by the Conservation Fund. We also met with Conservation Fund staff, including a full-time property manager with a background in historic preservation that they recently hired, and she is on site daily and oversees the preservation and maintenance of the buildings, the tenant properties, and the farm operations. All of this will help, this pre-work we've been doing will help facilitate the easement drafting process, which is really our next step, as well as our continued discussions with the Conservation Fund about the terms and provisions of the easement. Given the complexity of this project, we do believe we have a good grasp of the property at this point and its resources, and we feel confident that we will be able to continue to work with the Conservation Fund to address and resolve any issues that may arise as we work to complete the easement. So in summary, our Easement Acceptance Committee is recommending acceptance of the Oak Hill easement offer, subject to the following conditions: continued negotiations of the specific provisions, restrictions, and reserved rights to be included in the Board of Historic Resources easement, and final review of the title work, title commitment, survey, draft easement, and other recorded and unrecorded documents affecting title to the property by the Office of the Attorney General. Per this review, Council may identify additional issues that require documentation. Questions? I should mention too, Heather Richards, representing the Conservation Fund, is also attending the meeting virtually. So if there is a question I can address, I can also turn over questions to her.
Hi, and thank you for that incredible background. And hi, Heather. This is Mary Pope Hudson. I think we know each other pretty well. Glad you're on the call. I'm curious about the map that you showed of the 40 different sites within the agricultural kind of envelope that you were talking about, and whether or not there are any graveyards and burial sites within that area.
Not that we know of.
Okay.
It's likely there are, or potentially, we don't know where the enslaved quarters were. And so there potentially could be an unmarked cemetery associated with the enslaved individuals who lived on the property. At one point, directly south of the house in the terrace garden, one of Monroe's daughters, I believe, was buried in a vault. She was moved at some point later, so there's no actual burial there anymore.
So you haven't had any ground penetrating radar conducted there at this point?
No, not yet.
And it's the intention of the Conservation Fund to transfer the property to another owner?
Yes, but now there's, they're gonna hold it for a little bit longer than I think they initially anticipated. So right now, that might be a few years out. But that's partly too, they have hired a property manager.
Yeah, sounds like she's very well qualified.
Very well qualified, yeah.
That's great.
Yes.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you for answering my questions by email prior to the meeting. It was very helpful. Tell us a little bit about the Virginia Conservation Fund, or at least I don't understand what that is that a state agency?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's the Virginia Land Conservation Foundation is created through the Code of Virginia. The program itself, so the foundation is a board that meets and they administer a grant program, which is actually similar to us. It's administered by DCR staff at the Department of Conservation and Recreation. And so every year, the General Assembly appropriates a certain amount of funding for the Virginia Land Conservation Fund. And by the code language, those funds have to be split up into certain categories, one of which is historic area preservation. And when a project is funded in the historic area preservation category, the way the program is administered is that the Board of Historic Resources sort of gets the right of first refusal to hold that easement. So we would present any project funded in that category, to the board, our board.
To us.
For approval. And so this 88-acre portion got the $2 million grant award back in 2024 for preservation of just this portion of the property right now.
Okay. And thank you. And my other question, and I should have asked you this in the email, but how I asked the question of why are we doing the 88 acres now? And will we be able to consider the rest? And she answered it well. And how likely is it, will we be able to combine these properties back, or do you have any sense of that right now?
Do you mean through sort of a no division, they can never be separated and sold separately, or do you mean just?
No, I could, or I could see an advantage to having the core that we're talking about right now. That's attractive. If we could protect that core, that would be great. The rest of it, as living in the community, we would love to see, or I would like to see the whole piece connected, but they don't need to be reattached. But how likely is it that the extra 1,000 acres would be included, or that we get to consider an easement?
Oh, that we get to consider an easement.
Right.
To be honest, that's a little bit difficult to answer.
Okay.
Because part of the reason we weren't involved in it till now is the federal stateside land and water conservation fund money that they have to acquire, that they use to acquire it, to some degree conflicts with some of what we would need to do. So we've mentioned, recently we've expressed interest primarily. There are fewer buildings and structures on that 1,100 acres.
Right.
And so we've expressed interest in ensuring that the archaeological resources are protected. And so whether or not we're involved, it will be conserved as open space. But we've mentioned the possibility of coming in with an easement that sort of just focuses on archaeological resource protection, what we would call kind of an overlay easement on top of whatever else the Conservation Fund is going to do to protect it. And that's kind of just sort of early conversations, but this also came up when we looked at it internally with the Easement Acceptance Committee, the same exact question that you asked and concern, to make sure those historic resources, some of which are known archaeological resources on the larger property. And so we have a really good relationship with the Conservation Fund. Last year, we did a big project with them with the Rappahannock tribe conserving Foam's Cliffs. And so
Oh, yeah.
we approached that a little differently than our standard easement and it worked. So I think if they're open, we will continue to have those conversations. But unless a grant requires it, there's not necessarily going to be a hook for us other than continuing to talk to the Conservation Fund and express our interest and concern that, you know, those resources be protected.
Well, it's great that we're to this point. And I fully support it. And I hope that second phase happens as well.
And they've been great to work with. So I think the dialogue will definitely continue.
Good.
Any other questions? Great. Well, then I will turn it over to Kyle. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kyle Edwards, the
Illinois
Easements
Ladies Association.
Program Archaeologist. Sorry, there we go. Oops. All right, I went the wrong direction. I have 3 additional new easement offers to present. So this will begin your battlefield portion of the afternoon. We have 3 battlefield properties. And then as we previously addressed, I'll turn it over to the board to vote on all the easements together. The first property I'm presenting today is the Burton Family Farm Tract, located in Chesterfield County, Virginia, for which the applicant is Capital Region Land Conservancy. The easement offer consists of a single 4.183 acre parcel located along a heavily developed portion of Route 1. Historically, the parcel was an agricultural and residential use beginning in the late 19th century and continuing through the present day. Currently, the property has 3.88 acres under mature forested cover, while the remaining 0.3 acres is an open space, lawn, or field. An early 20th century house associated with the property will be excluded from the easement. Capital Region Land Conservancy acquired the property via a fee simple acquisition in April 2025 with the assistance from an American Battlefield Protection Program grant and a Virginia Outdoor Foundation Preservation Trust Fund grant, both of which require an easement. The Capital Region Land Conservancy plans to work with the former owner, Art Burton, Kinfolk RVA, a local nonprofit, and the Virginia Commonwealth University to use the property for urban agricultural training, growing food for the East End Food Justice Collaborative, and opening it for tours highlighting the property's battlefield history, as well as its connections to post-Civil War African-American history. The Burton Family Farm Tract is historically significant because it is within 2 battlefields with ratings from the Civil War Sites Advisory Commission. It is entirely within the core area of the Proctor's Creek battlefield, as defined by the Civil War Sites Advisory Commission, which has a priority 4.2 Class B rating, and partially within the study area of the Petersburg battlefield, this being the assault on Petersburg, which has a preservation 3.1 Class A rating. Most significantly, the Battle of Proctor's Creek occurred from May 12th to 16th, 1864, when Union Major General Benjamin Butler took the Army of the James from Bermuda Hundred to attack the Confederate fortification near Drury's Bluff. Despite initial success, the battle was ultimately a stalemate, resulting in Butler withdrawing back to Bermuda Hundred and nearly 6,000 casualties. Supporting the property's association with this battlefield, as well as the Petersburg battlefield, is a line of Confederate breastworks located immediately to the south of the property, which represented a critical portion of the defenses around Richmond. And due to the property's proximity to these breastworks, there's significant potential for archaeological remains associated with these fortifications. Beyond the battlefield significance, and I think this is a really important part of the property's history, the Burton Family Farm Tract is associated with the development of free African-American communities in Chesterfield County. In 1887, the Order of the Sons and Daughters of the Union Star, an African-American benevolent society, purchased a large tract of land between Kingsland and Proctor's Creek to provide land to local African-American families and establish a cemetery, which borders the property still today. In 1909, the Burton family acquired 2 acres from the Order of the Sons, and an adjacent 2 acres were acquired by the Mayo family in 1915. The property remained with these 2 families' descendants until the present day, giving a huge potential to augment our understanding of African American life and community in the 19th and 20th centuries. It's hard to overstate how important these resources are in Virginia because many similar communities are unknown to the general public, understudied, and are quickly being developed and are no longer recognizable. So I just want to highlight that with this property. The Easement Acceptance Committee recommends acceptance of the Burton Family Farm easement offer subject to the following conditions. 1, that the Capital Region Land Conservancy conveys an access easement to allow access to the property for DHR staff and the general public. And just to clarify this is because of the carving out of the domestic structure from the early 20th century. So CRLC owns that, and that'll be used by the organizations developing the property. But in order for our direct access from Route 1, they will grant us an easement over that portion of the property. And then 2, final review of the title work, title commitment, survey, draft easements, and other recorded and unrecorded documents affecting title to the property by the Office of the Attorney General. Per this review, council may identify additional issues that require documentation or action. So the next property I'm presenting is the Glass Tract located in Frederick County, Virginia. And Shenandoah Valley Battlefields Foundation is the applicant. The Glass Tract consists of 2 parcels totaling 127.273 acres that were previously part of the historic 280-acre Rose Hill Farm owned by the Glass Glen Burdy Foundation and operated as a county park. Today, the property includes 127 acres of forested cover and has 2 vacant frame dwellings on its eastern parcel. Shenandoah Valley Battlefields Foundation acquired the 2 parcels, which are separated by Route 37 in 2025, and has applied for an American Battlefield Protection Program grant and a Virginia Battlefields Preservation Fund grant to assist with its fee simple acquisition of the property. Both of these grants require an easement. The property is also adjacent to the Sandy Ridge Tract, already protected by the Board of Historic Resources easement, and another parcel that is currently under consideration by the easement program. I would also point out that there are other portions of the Kernstown battlefield that have been conserved by BHR and the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields Foundation, and this is an area of significant development pressure around Winchester. So being able to cobble together contiguous acres of open spaces is really important from a land conservation standpoint. The Glass Tract is historically significant because it lies within the boundaries of 3 Civil War battlefields as determined by the Civil War Sites Advisory Commission. The first Kernstown battlefield, which has a preservation priority 1.3 Class B rating. The second Kernstown battlefield, which has a preservation priority 4.1 Class B rating. And the second Winchester battlefield, which has a priority 4.1 Class B rating. Most significantly, the Glass Tract is entirely within the core area of the first Kernstown battlefield and was central to the climax of the battle. The battle took place on March 23rd, 1862, when relying on faulty intelligence that reported a Union garrison at Winchester numbered only about 3,000. Confederate Major General Thomas Stonewall Jackson marched aggressively north from the upper valley with his 3,400-man division. However, there were 8,500 Union troops commanded by Colonel Nathan Kimball, and they stopped Jackson at Kernstown on March 23rd, and then counterattacked, turning Jackson's left flank along Sandy Ridge and forcing him to retreat. Heavy fighting took place on the northwestern slope of Sandy Ridge, extending onto the property until the Confederates, running low on ammunition, began a retreat in defiance of Jackson's orders. The battle resulted in 1,308 casualties, and despite the Confederate defeat, it forced the Union to divert reinforcements from the Army of the Potomac, then moving towards Richmond to protect the Shenandoah Valley. The glass track is also partially within the National Register boundaries for the Rose Hill Farm, which was listed on the Virginia Landmarks Register in 1996 and the National Register of Historic Places in 1997 under criteria A and C. Rose Hill Farm includes a two-story federal-style dwelling and associated outbuildings. Granting of the glass easement will help protect the Rose Hill's historic landscape and any associated archaeological resources that extend onto the property. The Easement Acceptance Committee recommends acceptance of the glass tract easement offer subject to the following conditions. 1, the demolition of the existing non-historic buildings and structures and a rehabilitation of the landscape completed within 3 years from the date of the easement recordation. Rehabilitation or restoration of the landscape shall be conducted according to a written rehabilitation management plan negotiated by DHR and the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields Foundation. And such plan shall be incorporated into the easement directly or by reference. 2, the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields Foundation must provide perpetual, direct, and dedicated access for DHR staff and the general public to the western parcel, either via a pull-off located along Jones Road or another direct route. And I will go back real quick. This is again because the parcels are separated by Route 37. So this fronts and has a driveway on the public road, and this does not. So in our discussions with SVBF, rather than accessing it through the remainder of the park, they have agreed to sort of provide us access at an additional location that will keep us from having to rely on other landowners to access it. And then finally, a final review of the title work, title commitment, survey, draft easements, and other recorded and unrecorded documents affecting title to the property by the Office of the Attorney General. Per this review, council may identify additional issues that require documentation or action. So now our final property for consideration today is the Kaler Farm Tract located in Rockingham County, Virginia. This is an easement-only transaction, and the applicant is the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields Foundation on behalf of Lewiston Farm LLC and Ellen Kaler, the property owners. The property consists of 169.891 acres over 2 parcels that are currently in agricultural and residential use. This includes approximately 20 outbuildings associated with the continued agricultural use of the property and a dwelling constructed around 1920. An approximately 5-acre portion of the property is separated from the main farm by Southeast Side Highway. And the Kalers have granted access over this portion to an adjacent church and home. And SVBF intends to install an interpretive trail on this portion of the property and create a roadside pull-off for public visitation purposes. So this is just a view of the property. This is the portion of the property that is across the main road, so it's bisected by the right-of-way. And right here, SVBF has granted this church, or not SVBF, the Kalers have granted them use of this gravel parking area for church services on Sunday. And there's also additional unrelated residents back here. So this resident has use of the property to access their driveway. But in working with SVBF and the Kaler family, we've determined that this doesn't significantly impact the easement. The Shenandoah Valley Battlefields Foundation was awarded a Virginia Battlefield Preservation Fund grant in 2024 and will apply for an American Battlefield Protection Program grant to assist with easement costs. And the conveyance of an easement to the board is a condition of both these grants. The Kaler Farm Tract is historically significant because it lies within the core area of the Port Republic Battlefield, which has been given a preservation priority 2.2 Class B rating by the Civil War Sites Advisory Commission. Battle of Port Republic occurred on June 9th, 1862, following the Confederate victory at the Battle of Cross Keys. Confederate General Thomas Stonewall Jackson launched an early morning surprise attack on outnumbered Union forces under Brigadier General Erastus B. Tyler who were camped in a defensive position along a ridge that extends to a knob called the coaling to the southeast of the property. And the coaling is actually like right out of frame over here. And BHR has an easement over that as well. It's that Edwards tract, right, Wendy? Fearing the arrival of Union reinforcements, Jackson ordered his disassembled troops to immediately attack across the lower open wheat fields, which include the Kaler tract, towards the Union ridgeline position. Confederate forces suffered significant losses from Union artillery fire and temporarily fell back, but a second attack bolstered by Confederate reinforcements turned the tide of the battle. This resulted in a Confederate victory with a total of 1,818 casualties. Perhaps most importantly, the victory put the Shenandoah Valley firmly within Confederate control in 1862 and allowed Jackson to send forces to help in the defense of Richmond. The Easement Acceptance Committee recommends acceptance of the Kaler Tract easement offer subject to the following conditions. 1, agreement on a maximum collective footprint of 0.75% of the total acreage of the easement, including permitted new improvements, existing non-historic resources, and existing historic resources. Easement staff will continue to work with the Kaler family to clarify details of this cap and answer any questions they may have. And we wanted to include this clearly as a condition because the Kalers, in maintaining ownership of the property, want to continue its agricultural use. And this sort of acreage cap was meant to permit their existing agricultural buildings and allow future agricultural use of the property in a way that the EAC determined would not significantly impact the battlefield landscape. This is a case where historically this was agricultural land, so keeping it in agriculture kind of fits with the historical uses of the property. And then criteria 2 is final review of the title work, title commitment, survey, draft easements, and other recorded and unrecorded documents affecting title to the property by the Office of the Attorney General. Per this review, council may identify additional issues that require documentation or action. That is all I have for new easements today. If you all have any questions about any of those properties, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Is there any discussion regarding any of these easement offers? Questions? Concerns? No. Thank you very much for the information and the briefing on this. May I have a motion then to approve the easement offers for consideration 1 through 4 as a block as presented by the staff?
So moved.
First, thank you. And a second by Martin.
Second.
All right, thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. And so moved to approve the easement offers for consideration, the entire block 1 through 4.
And sorry.
Yeah, no, so you'll now go over the ones that have been recorded since the last meeting.
Yes, since our last meeting, 2 easements, additional easements have been recorded. The first is the Amelia and Associates LLC tract located in Dinwiddie County. This is on 4 Civil War battlefields, so 5 Forks, White Oak Road, Boyden Plank Road, and Petersburg 3, the breakthrough. And it was funded by the National Park Service and Virginia Conservation or Virginia Lands Conservation Foundation Fund grants. And it was a total of 11 acres. Then our other one was the Carter tract at the 7 Pines battlefield. And this was also an 11-acre property funded by the American Battlefield Protection Program and the Virginia Land Conservation Foundation. I'll note that with our new director in the building, Amelia and Associates was Roger's first easement. And then we have Carter tract, which was Julie's last one she executed in her role as director. So a nice transition here at this meeting. And Carter tract is pretty important because there's not a whole lot of undeveloped land in that part of Henrico County right now. So.
All right, are there any other closing comments from the board or more questions? Pretty straightforward. May I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
So moved. I think we've all moved. Jamie Basket with the first. and Mary Hudson with the second. All in favor, please say aye for adjourning.
Aye.
All right. The meeting of the Board of Historic Resources is adjourned.